Fear is one of those things that really can trip you up and keep you stuck and keep you from moving forward. And fear is not a weakness, it's an indication. I know that fear has impacted me in major ways throughout the course of my life. I've had to work through those things, and fear does sometimes continue to come up, and I have to recognize that. But when I've come to see it as an indication, it lets me know that there is something that is causing the fear, and there is something that I can do about it. And often when we think about fear, you may think of fear of just flat out saying, I feel scared, I feel afraid. And all the time, that is not how fear is showing up. So I want to talk about, and what I will talk about today, are ways that fear shows up and you don't even recognize it as fear because it masks itself in different ways for many people. Some of our lowest natured behavior really is rooted in fear. So let's talk about some ways that this can show up. And I think it's really important, especially for people who are working in leadership roles or in healing spaces where you are putting forth efforts to support other people. It's hard to do that effectively if fear is running the show in our lives. It's very difficult to be able to really do that. So it's important to recognize where it shows up because awareness is key. And when we can be aware of something, then we can take those next very important steps. So one way that fear can show up is through overthinking and anxiety. This might be the most relatable way that a person may be able to say, okay, anxiety is fear, but everyone doesn't recognize anxiety as fear. But before things get to anxiety, oftentimes it's rooted in something that you fear that becomes more and more intense, and then it can start showing up as anxiety. And these types of things can really impact how you move through the course of anything that you really want to do. So when we think about fear and anxiety, you can really think of the what ifs that you that may run through your mind often. It's the thing that keeps you in contemplation. It keeps you, in this place where you're thinking so much that it's hard to make a decision. And that can be anxiety because you can be thinking about worst case scenarios. So those what ifs can really be the what ifs of the worst case scenarios. And that can lead to anxiety when we're doing that so much that you're almost crippled in fear because you almost can't make a decision because you can be afraid of what the outcome is going to be. And when we do this, we can also be in a place where you are trying to get so much advice from other people, so many perspectives from other people. And this is exactly what will happen. You will get so many perspectives from other people that you won't even have a perspective anymore. It'll be the overwhelm then will be making a decision after you have all of these opinions. So, fear really can look like anxiety, and it can look like, really overthinking a matter, so much so that you never really make a decision, or you make a decision that's not even rooted in what it is that you personally would want, or from your own personal thoughts. It can be masked by so many other people's thoughts. So overthinking and anxiety is one way. And do you find yourself overthinking about things? You have a decision to make, and it's hard to make that decision. I remember some years ago, I had a friend who we were talking and didn't know that it was anxiety, but I remember my friend saying this to me, and I remember relating to it very well, that she didn't feel like she could make the right decision, or it was hard for her to make the right decisions at that point. And, looking back, there were a lot of things going on in her life, a lot of stressors that could have been increasing fear. When you've had certain experiences in life that maybe didn't go the way that you would have liked, that can set up fear, you know what I mean? And then making a decision from that point, you could really be somewhere in the back of your mind, even if you don't recognize it in that moment, you can be fearful of making a decision based off of past experiences that have happened. So you can find yourself overthinking to want to make sure you make the right decision, But sometimes we're not going to know what the right decision is until we make it and we just learn from the experience that we've had after that. The second way that fear can be showing up, and you not even recognize it, is through anger. I remember talking to a therapist and having a parent who I had so much anger toward, and I could never figure out why I had all that anger. And when we really dissected that, looking at historical things that had happened in my life, certain scenarios, it really was rooted in fear. The fear of what would happen to this parent, the fear of this parent's behaviors. It wasn't just being angry at them. It was a fear that certain negative experiences would come into their life based off of the decisions that they were making, and feeling helpless in that. There could be a lot of fear as a child, recognizing that you really are helpless to somebody else's decision making, especially an adult. And a lot of fear did come from that. But the way that that came up for me when I felt so helpless is the next mechanism I used to function was through anger. And so oftentimes when a person is angry, or when you're angry, you could be lashing out as a protective mechanism in a way, because you could be afraid of being hurt. You could be afraid of being abandoned, or you could have situations that are going on where you're afraid of being exposed about something. Maybe there's something that you have some shame about, or it's not your proudest moment, but being afraid that that could be exposed. Sometimes the way that we can protect ourselves from that is through anger. And oftentimes you don't recognize that at the beginning. You don't recognize that your anger is a way to deal with fear, because you really think of anger as being very opposite of fear. Oftentimes you think of anger as being bold or being courageous. But if we're snapping off or, lashing out in some intense ways, sometimes those ways of lashing out, or really when you are lashing out, it can be counterproductive. It's not productive. It's not helpful. It can cause more problems. That anger can cause more issues. That just leaves even more to have to be addressed and dealt with. But when we are lashing out, it oftentimes can be a self-protective mechanism that probably isn't working the best in your life. Especially if you find that, oftentimes your relationships are on a sour note because of anger, because of the way that you may be lashing out at the people that you probably love or care about or are there to support at the least. That anger can be getting in the way, and it can really be causing damage in relationships. So anger is another way that shows up in one way, but at the root of it often is fear. And just think about some of the most violent acts that happen in our society. If you really were to break a lot of those down, when we talk about racism, oftentimes this race that is causing pain has a fear of some sort that they have some threat from this other group of people. So even though it comes off very harsh and with a lot of anger, oftentimes there's a fear element at the very basis of that experience. And then if you're someone who procrastinates, I would really encourage you to search why you procrastinate. And oftentimes procrastination is an avoidance mechanism. Because there's a fear. There could be a fear of failing. There could be a fear of not feeling like you're capable of doing something. And you can avoid this by procrastinating. And procrastinating can look like keeping yourself busy with things that really don't make any difference. They really just kill time. They really just keep you from doing the direct thing that it is that you need to do. But that avoidance is there because there's some fear behind why you just won't address that thing. Maybe you think it's harder than what it seems. You're telling yourself that something is harder than it seems. So avoidance is one of those things that keep you from being able to progress to what it is that you really want in life. Avoidance can help you keep you from dealing with certain matters in life, relationship matters. Sometimes it's important for us to have a conversation with someone that where there's an issue, and avoidance can be that thing that keeps you from having that conversation. I know for me, I used to, just from my background, oftentimes I saw confrontation or having to have a conversation as confrontation. And I saw confrontation as something that would be volatile because that's something I experienced. So for me, oftentimes having certain conversations I would avoid because my fear was that it would become chaotic or things would explode or things would end, violently. So really searching when you're procrastinating about something, if it's a task that you need to do, if it's a conversation that you need to have, what is it that you're thinking about at the base of that would be the worst case scenario? And is that what's leading your decision making? Is that what is causing you to procrastinate at the end of the day? When we procrastinate, it could keep you from experiencing some pain that you might have a fear that you'll experience. So that fear of that pain could be a fear of failure. It could be a fear of finding out that maybe a relationship isn't as strong as you thought it was because the relationship falls apart when you address an issue. It could be finding out that someone doesn't value you the way that you hope that they would or the way that you value them. So really, thinking about what is it at the base of that behavior that you have with avoidance or procrastination. What is it really that you're procrastinating or avoiding finding out? What is really at the base of that? People pleasing is something I've been talking about. People pleasing, it could be that fear of rejection. It could be the fear of not being liked by someone. Because when we are pleasing someone, we're really trying to get on someone's good side. We are really trying to be liked. We're trying to please because we want that response that is pleasant from the people that we're trying to please. But when we are people pleasing, we're not being authentic. And you probably, in the grand scheme of things, you're still not really getting what you want. You could be getting someone's response to you based off of you catering to them. But what happens when you're not able to cater to them? And you have to choose yourself or something else above that catering. Does the relationship completely change? That can be a scary revelation that you have to find out from someone when you decide to say, I can't do this for you, or I can't be there for you in the way that you would like me to. But you're trying to be there for yourself. And so, often it's really thinking about who do we value more, the people that we're trying to please or ourselves. And oftentimes the answer really is that we are valuing the other people more. And that's why we're putting ourselves on the back burner when it comes to making decisions, who's going to benefit and who's going to not benefit. And it's too long for us to be deciding not to benefit from our personal decisions and that only the other people benefit and that you're put on the back burner, because you have to feed yourself in order to be able to feed someone else. And once you can love yourself in that way, appreciate yourself, you see your value first. I really know that attracting other people like that comes from you holding that within yourself first. So the people pleasing really deep down really is a fear of a rejection. And what does that mean about you? What core belief really comes up about yourself when someone else is rejecting you? And last is going to be silence. Silence and shutting down. At the base of that also can be a fear. And that is because there are some people who can fear saying the wrong thing, finding out something that really hurts sometimes the way to deal with that is to just shut down and not even go there. But you can imagine how damaging this can be to relationships. If it's personal relationships, if it's relationships in leadership, if it's relationships when you are caring for other people. If you shut down, that means communication shuts down, and we can't really get anywhere in a healthy way if our communication is shut down. You may even have a fear of being too much. Maybe you shut down or you quiet yourself because if you put yourself out there, you get judged, just for being who it is that you are. So it's easier to quiet yourself. But it's not the best thing for you to quiet who you are, because we are here to show up as who it is that we are. And I think the vast majority of people, myself included, have been in places where you shut yourself down, you quiet yourself because of either being too much or being judged in some way, or being not valued in some type of way. But you deserve to be valued by yourself first. You deserve to show up as who it is that you came here to be and who it is that you really are. And the truth is, that's not gonna fit everybody. Everybody's not gonna vibe with that, but that should not be our goal, to get everyone to vibe with us. Because once we do that, we know we're not being ourselves, because there's no way that you could vibe with everyone. There are going to be people who don't agree with how you are and what you do, but there are people who will. But the first important person for you to appease is you. Be yourself truly, and learn to love and embrace that. And other people will either not like that, and that's okay, especially if you're not looking to get people to like you as the initial goal in your life. And then there are going to be people who will love you, but the important thing is to have this learning of self-love, self-appreciation, so that we're not, playing this game of silencing ourselves so that we can just have people in our space. It's more important to have people in your space who really line up with who it is that you are. And the only way to really do that is to be who it is that you are. And the way to be who it is that you are is to not silence yourself, to not shut down, to be able to express who it is that you are, and, allow the people who vibe with that to come along in that circle. So fear is not just as simple as saying, I am afraid. Fear shows up in our life, and it's important to recognize how it is so that you're not continuing to be limited in your self-expression, limited in your experience with life. And also, when we know what we fear, then we can start working on how to address those fears, how to deal with those fears, how to get over those fears, because it is possible. That is what I'm leaving with you today. Let me know in the comments what fear has held you back. Of these 5, has it been overthinking? Has it been anger? Has it been avoidance? Has it been people pleasing? Or has it been shutting down? Maybe it's been something outside of that, but let me know in the comment section. And share this video, like this video, and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.